Right. Um, this week's lesson is an introduction to critical thinking. Oh, I should use it as an introduction to critical thinking. Critical thinking is the ability to evaluate information, consider different perspectives, and propose solutions based on evidence and logical reasoning, basically, right? The lesson focuses, this particular lesson focuses on developing these skills through a real world issue: the rise in assaults on ambulance workers, right? So I really want this lesson to help you to evaluate the information that is given to you and that you receive. I want you to consider different perspectives on the issue, for and against the argument. Um, I want you to propose a solution based on the evidence and logical reasoning. All right. This lesson focuses on developing these skills for a real world issue, which is assaults on ambulance workers, right, or emergency service workers. Now, by engaging in this exercise, you will learn how to research facts. You'll learn, not only will you learn how to research facts, but you'll be able to construct reasoned arguments, right? Arguments based on reasons, and present persuasive ideas in formal setting. So, why is this important? In a democratic society, decisions affecting public policy are often made through debates and discussions in government. Understanding how to craft compelling arguments helps you to become an informed citizen capable of contributing meaningfully in society, right? As we all do as citizens, right? We all contribute to our society in Australia, right? Whether it's you contacted council over rates, whether you contacted council over laws, fix the roads, stuff like that, example, right? That's just an example. Um, I want you to really understand, and I'll also want to help you improve on your public speaking skills. And I also want to encourage ethical reasoning as well. All right. So obviously, this week's assignment is about emergency service workers, particularly ambulance service members, right? And I'll go back up here for a second. Okay, so I want you to pretend that you're the member of parliament and you're sitting in the federal level of parliament, and you are sitting in a seat or a minister in a position that represents emergency service workers. You've been approached to address the growing problem of assaults on ambulance workers. Your task will be to write a compelling parliamentary speech discussing the issue, its impacts, and proposing solutions. Now, basically, this happens a lot. You'll get members of the police that approach the Minister for Roads and stuff, infrastructure, stuff like that, to change road laws and rules. You'll get this from the fire, stuff like that, to change legislation, basically. You'll get approached most likely by the union representative, so a union member who works and represents ambulance members. They're part of a member or a unionized movement, and they present what all the members of the ambulance, which is the employees, approach the union member, and the union member then addresses this to the member of parliament, which is that this is your job. Your job, you've taken this on from the union member, basically, right? Now, your speech shall include an introduction. I want you to begin by addressing the Speaker of the House. I'm going to share this with you as well. Let me just give me a second. I'll share my screen. There we go. Okay, so I want you to begin by addressing the House, the Speaker of the House. You shall clearly state the issue you are addressing, the scope of the crisis. So I want you to provide statistics or examples of assaults on ambulance workers. This can include court cases and outcomes in regards to assaults on ambulance workers. So I can think of a few cases now that have gone forward. So you can obviously use that. Please do. That it doesn't have to be that detailed, but I would like you to be able to address this by providing statistics and examples of assaults on ambulance workers. I want you to explain why this is a serious issue. I want you to then discuss how insults affect emergency service workers, including staff well-being and public safety. I want you to propose measures. There we go here. I want you to propose measures. I want you to I want to suggest you to suggest at least 3 policy solutions, such as legal protections, mental health support, and public awareness campaigns. Um, this is really important to making a policy. Now, look, you can pretty much come up with legal protections because I know this is really hard for people who are at this level, but um, come up with just legal protection solution maybe, right? Or you could, if it's simpler, come up with a mental health support plan in Parliament. How are you going to what solutions can you come up with in Parliament? What proposals can you come up with for mental health support for ambulance workers? Or can we do public awareness campaigns? I don't know if you've seen recently these ads on TV. I don't think they're still going. I haven't seen that, but they had these ads. Um, they had these ads based on violence in the workplace. So I'm going to give you an example. Violence in workplace campaign. Oh, it was in Australia. I want. So they had these work violence in the workplace campaign. Um, I think this came out. Um, it came out from COVID. I think it was. It was like a thing from COVID. So basically, there was a whole bunch of ads on where they put you in the first person perspective of someone who's at work and the person who's abusing the person at work. This would have came from Parliament. If I go, so if we go, I've got to go to Google because this is not. I'm going to go to ads. There it is. Okay, so this is like no one deserves a serve. That's what it was. No one deserves a serve. So if we go here for um, the ad that came out of Parliament. So this would have been funded by Canberra, by taxpayers' money, and this was brought up to Parliament by um, probably by a union member, I'm guessing. I'm not too sure who brought this up, but it basically would have been brought to a member of Parliament, and they would have brought him with these statistics, right? So if you look down here, it says in 2023, a survey of over 4,600 workers found the prevalence of abuse and violence by customers has not improved since the previous survey. So this is your issue here, right? In the last 12 months, 80%, 87% of workers said they had experienced verbal abuse from customers both in 2016 and 2021. The survey recorded at 87%, right? So 9%, so if we go down here, this is going to be really important for informing a policy in Parliament, right? So if we go, workers experienced increased frequency of verbal abuse over a sustained period of time rather than just in isolated events. Of those who experienced verbal abuse, 76% experienced it on a more regular basis, monthly, weekly, or daily, compared to 4% sorry, in 2021. Okay, so 12.5% of respondents said they had been victim of physical violence from a customer, compared with 8% in the 2021 survey. 9% of respondents said they had been spat on. 10% of respondents experienced customer abuse online, double the results of 2021. Right, so showing prevalence and the reason why this is important. Right, now it says that in December 2019, the SDA officially launched a No One Deserves to Serve campaign to create awareness about retail and fast food workers facing constant abusive and violent behaviour from customers at work. The initial survey accompanied a launch of the campaign received responses of over 6,000 workers and their experiences with customers, abuse and violence. Now, this would have been funded by Parliament, I'm guaranteeing you that. So what I want to look at is what are they going to do? What are these groups here? What are these groups going to do about it? Right? So what are they implementing? So if we go, support the eradication of customer disrespect, abuse, and violence from our workplace, commit to positively and publicly promoting, supporting a culture of respect and dignity. So I don't know if you've ever seen these now. When you walk into like a shop, it'll say we have the right to call the police if you abuse or threaten us or whatever. They can kick you out, and that's new now. So a lot of these stores now are following the head Australian Retailers Association. These are the people that would have approached members of Parliament for this. Um, so obviously, see how they have these new signs now, right? They have zero tolerance policies now. Aggressive and abusive behaviour will not be tolerated. Sorry, right now. These stores are taking action. So the SDA, if we go and have a look, what are we doing about this? So let's see what their campaigns currently are. Yeah, so these are the union basically that I'm looking at. I'm just looking at what their policies are actually trying to be better jobs, safety not guaranteed, reduction mandatory guardrails, SDA submission to review paid family. So they're reviewing paid domestic violence leave for workers. It's about creating different cultures and stuff like that inside the workplace. So submissions to the Senate regarding respect to work cost protections bill. See what that is. So I want to show you at least one thing. Well, I won't go too far. What if I show you this? This is what a submission looks like. This is a submission to a member of parliament. So the SDA welcomes the opportunity to make a submission to the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs Committee on the Australian Human Rights Commission Amendment Cost Protections Bill. The SDA has made previous submissions in relation to the cost of the model of federal anti-discrimination laws. So basically, they're saying this is what you'll get as a member of the parliament. You'll get this kind of stuff. SEA members, the majority of which are women and young people, work predominantly in retail and fast food. The Time Respect Fifth National Survey on Sexual Harassment in Australia Workplace found that the experience of sexual harassment is notably higher for workers in retail trade at 40%, the fast food industry at 34%. Retail has the third highest prevalence of sexual harassment, and fast food has the fourth highest. Retail trade. So basically, they're saying the prevalence, the issue at hand with statistics, and they're actually using cases. So they should go here. So for these reasons, the SDA welcomes and supports bill which implements a modified equal access cost model in federal anti-discrimination law in Australia. The SDA believes that this will address a key barrier in workers pursuing a complaint in relation to discrimination or sexual harassment. So they're endorsing the bill. This is what we want it to do. We want to give this bill here that amend the Human Rights Commission amendment to amend it, and they want to amend it. This is what they want the bill to do. They want it to extradite the complaints making process so that workers experiencing sexual harassment in the workplace have a more it's kind of like a guaranteed chain of events. So you've got the manager, head manager. So it's going through the process. It's an easier way of simplifying protections for workers in under those conditions. Just to explain and show what a submission from a union would look like to a member of parliament. That's to the Senate itself, and each member of the Senate will get a copy of that. So it urged fellow parliamentarians to take action and to support the proposal, as you saw in that statement. It summarised the points and ended with a closing statement. So the critical thinking prompts are: why do you think assaults on ambulance workers have increased? What policies do you believe would be most effective in reducing these assaults? Because at the moment, there is a case out there that nullifies mandatory laws, basically. So, how should the government balance the public safety and the rights of individuals? I want an evaluation criteria. Go to my window for a second. So, I want clarity. So, this is what I really want. I want clarity and structure of the speech. It needs to be clear and it needs to be structured in a way that is good. I want you to use relevant examples and statistics. I will evaluate your persuasiveness and the strength of your arguments. I want you to be creative and thoughtful. with your policy proposals. But you must write this speech in a formal tone. Use clear, well-organised paragraphs, right? I'm not going to worry too much about word length, really, but I want you to be clear, clarity, structure, relevant examples and statistics. I want you to be persuasive. That's what I'm. Your persuasiveness, your arguments, your strength of your arguments, stuff like that. This is what I'm going to be looking at. What have you done? So I've written a little thing down here. Introduction. Dear Madam Speaker, I rise today to address a pressing and deeply troubling issue. So this is really important, which we're going to get out of that for a second. So recently in Australia, we've had a rise in anti-Semitism. And with that rise in anti-Semitism, we've had terror attacks or attacks that have been classed as terrorism. We've had 2 synagogues firebombed, I should say. One in Melbourne somewhere, and the other one is in Sydney. So I'm going to address this issue, and I've written my speech already for this. So I've got a debating partner as well, which I'm going to bring up right now. No. I don't. Let me give a call. Hello. Hello. Is it even working? It's just downloading something. Sorry about this, but I just have to download something. I apologize because it wants to be pairs of technology, eh? One day I'll be able to afford someone to come in and debate me on this better technology. So one day, maybe.
Hello.
Oh, there you are.
What do you mean, Nicole?
Why do you keep doing that? I changed it on the bloody thing. I changed my name to Nick on the thing. Why haven't you done that?
Okay, let's just call you Nick then. No worries. You remember.
Good. All right. So what I
Nice to hear that. Nick,
what
how
I
can I assist you further?
well, I've got something for you today. Actually, I want to raise a bill for Parliament, doing a parliamentary speech, and I want you to counteract my speech, if that's all right with you. I need someone to debate my speech.
Sounds like a lot of fun. Nick, I'd love to help you prepare for your speech and even counteract it afterwards. What topic are you planning to discuss?
So I'm going to give you an introduction, and I'm going to introduce my speech into Parliament. Are you ready?
Go ahead. I'm all ears.
Okay. Mr. and Madam Speaker, I raise today
You
to
seem a bit short of words. Is everything okay?
you got to listen now, okay? Madam Speaker, I rise today to address a pressing and deeply troubling issue: the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia. This phenomenon threatens the very fabric of our multicultural society. As representatives of a diverse nation, We must confront this menace with unity, resolve, and legislative action.
So, Nick, you're bringing up the topic of anti Semitism in Australia. It's a very concerning issue indeed. What kind of legislative action do you propose to tackle this problem?
So I must address the current state of anti Semitism. Recent reports have shown disturbing increases in anti Semitic incidents, including verbal abuse, vandalism of Jewish sites, and online hate campaigns. According to the Executive Council of the Australian Jury 2023 report, anti Semitic incidents rose by 35% compared to the previous year, with over 490 reported cases involving harassment, threats, and property damage. Such acts are not isolated, they reflect a growing societal issue that demands our immediate attention.
The statistics are alarming. Nick, a 35% increase in anti Semitic incidents is unacceptable. Harassment, threats, and property damage are all forms of hate that require urgent attention.
We are reminded of a dark chapter in global history when anti Semitism was left unchecked, leading to a horrific consequences. Australia must never allow such hatred to fester on its own soil. Our history as a safe haven for Holocaust survivors underscores Australia's responsibility to combat bigotry in all its forms.
Hatred and intolerance can lead to devastating outcomes. Nick,
Okay, so this is where we're going to debate on this, all right? I want you. What position do you want to take? The opposition or the person proposing the bill?
that sounds like a great opportunity to engage in a respectful discussion. Nick, I'll take the opposing viewpoint to challenge your proposals. Let's dive right in.
Right, we need to strengthen hate crime laws. We need to enhance penalties for hate crimes targeting religious and ethnic minorities.
I agree that hate crimes targeting religious and ethnic minorities are a serious concern. Nick, however, strengthening laws alone may not be enough.
We need to have a deterrent, right? We need not only to just strengthen our laws, our strengthening our hate crime laws will include a protest restriction free zones around religious sites of the same that's done in abortion clinics.
I strongly believe that reproductive rights are human rights.
That's not my point. You're missing the point. I want to strengthen our hate laws to include protest exclusion zones around religious sites like synagogues.
I understand your concerns, Nick, but aren't exclusion zones around religious sites a bit extreme?
Well, it seems that these terrorist attacks, by allowing these motivated political attacks, are coming from protests that are allowed to continue outside religious places of worship. I believe that by having an amended hate crime legislation that bans protesting outside or within a certain amount of feet within a place of prayer is warranted.
Nick, I see your point about wanting to protect places of worship, but isn't banning protests near religious sites a bit restrictive? It could stifle free speech.
Well, it seems that's what we have to do right now because we are not touching the issue here. The issue is increasing. The violence, the rhetoric, the anti Semitic hate, and it's causing levels of violence and terrorism in a multicultural state.
think we're all aware of the severity of this issue. Nick, the rise in anti-Semitic hate crimes is indeed alarming and requires immediate attention.
Well, I'm going to put it to you. Well, I'm not going to put it to you, but I'm going to argue that the country of Australia owes it citizens, especially Jewish citizens, the right to the same protections. And it seems that the protections we're offering right now are too weak to respond to the current threat.
Nick, completely understand your sentiment. Many Australians feel a sense of responsibility towards protecting their fellow citizens who face hate crimes.
You're meant to be debating me on a bill. This is a bill.
Okay, let's get started then. As I understand it, you're proposing a bill to strengthen hate crime laws and enhance penalties for hate crimes targeting religious and ethnic minorities.
Well, this just wouldn't do that. This would prevent protests in front of or around religious worship sites.
That's a broad stroke. Nick, wouldn't that restrict peaceful protests and gatherings outside
Well,
religious sites?
these protests are now, especially the Free Palestine protests, they are not peaceful. They have turned violent, and they are showing that they are not willing to be peaceful. They want to be violent. We need to restrict these protests.
Nick, while I agree that some protests have turned violent, restricting peaceful protests might infringe upon people's rights to free speech and assembly, including those expressing support for Palestine.
So let me answer you. Before you said you agree with abortion rights, human rights. You said that, agreed?
Actually, Nick, I was responding to a different point you made earlier. My
No,
statement on
no, no,
abortion
no, no,
rights
no,
is a
no.
separate issue from our discussion on hate crime laws and protest restrictions.
No. I said we should have the same restrictions as in abortion clinics. And you said you agreed with that because it is a human right. Agreed or not agreed?
Nick, I don't recall saying I agreed with restrictions on abortion clinics. I think we were discussing something else
No, we weren't.
entirely.
No, we were not. I said that our hate laws should extend to having the same restriction zones as in abortion clinics. You turned around and you said, yes, I agree, because abortion clinics is a human right. I got you on recording.
Nick, it's been a misunderstanding. I never said that restricting areas around religious sites is the same as abortion clinic restrictions.
Why
Those
is
are
it?
very
No,
different situations.
hang on a second. Why are you restricting people's right to protest outside an abortion clinic and not protecting the right to restrict protesters outside religious places of worship?
That's not fair. Nick, abortion clinics and places of worship are two completely different contexts.
So you're more willing to murder children, to murder unborn babies, and take away protesters' rights under those conditions, but you're not willing to take away protesters' rights under conditions where they make people feel threatened inside their places of worship.
That's not fair. Nick, your words are hurtful and don't accurately represent our discussion.
It does represent what you're saying. You are saying that. You are saying that people's rights to protest outside of an abortion clinic is right, and people's rights to protest being taken away outside the front of synagogues is wrong because it restricts their freedom of speech. Why is that wrong?
The abortion ban is terrible. I consider myself pro choice and support human rights.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I said that you should restrict people's movements under anti hate legislation, right? to be 150 meters away from a religious place of worship, then you said that is unfair and restrictive to people's movements and liberties. But when I raise the question of abortion clinics doing this, you say, well, no, they should be allowed. They shouldn't be allowed to do that because it's a human right for women to kill kids.
I'm worried about the abortion ban news. Reproductive rights are a basic human right. I am strongly pro-choice.
What? Obviously, you're not pro-choice. You're not pro-choice because you don't want to say to me that it's okay for protesters to protest outside an abortion clinic.
That's not true. Nick, I'm strongly pro-choice and I believe in respecting people's freedom of speech.
Oh, I bet you do. Right, but what about violence? When should we block this? When should we block people's ability to protest? At what point?
Nick, blocking people's ability to protest altogether sounds like a slippery slope. Where do we draw the line between peaceful and violent protests?
Well, you don't because they encourage violence. Generally, Australia is known as a protest state.
Nick, I understand your point about protests encouraging violence, but Australia's history of protest doesn't necessarily mean we should restrict peaceful gatherings.
Well, one, they're not gathering to be peaceful. They're gathering to shout slurs, to shout racism, to tell Jewish people who probably don't even have anything to do with the Israel war to die.
Nick, I understand your fear of hate speech, but we need to differentiate between peaceful protests and those that incite violence.
Well, we need to do something. We need to strengthen our hate laws to protect people, to make them feel safe. This is a multicultural state where people should be allowed to to practice their religion freely of hate, racism, and violence.
Absolutely. Nick, everyone deserves to feel safe and respected in our community, regardless of their background or beliefs.
So then you agree that restricting some rights to uphold that is more beneficial than restricting no rights.
Nick, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Restricting some rights isn't necessarily more beneficial. It depends on the context and the rights being restricted.
Well, my restriction rights is that you'll have a parameter around religious sites such as synagogues, ashrams. So we're protecting all religions, not just one, right? You need an exclusion zone of more than 150 to 250 meters away from the entrance or exit of a synagogue. What would you say to that?
I think that makes more sense. Nick, it's essential to create a buffer zone to ensure everyone feels safe and protected.
So you'll be willing to agree with my hate laws under those context?
Honestly, Nick, I'm getting uncomfortable with the direction of our conversation. Can we find common ground on this?
No, we cannot because we need to create a safe environment in our country. You might be uncomfortable, but guess what? There's a part of this country that feel like their life is in danger. And that's not on.
I understand your perspective, Nick, but it's hard for me to see restrictions on free speech as a solution to creating a safer environment.
Well, one, I'm not restricting people's freedom of speech. I'm restricting where they can do that freedom of speech. I said that I will create an 250-meter exclusion zone from any entrance and exit to any religious site. I'm not restricting them freedom of speech. I'm not restricting them business,
Nick, even with boundary, tensions could still escalate.
which is a problem. It will escalate. That's why I'm going to recommend to introduce mandatory school programs that will teach the history of Holocaust and the importance of tolerance.
Education can go a long way in promoting understanding and empathy.
So, would you agree to implementing an education program into schools that will introduce mandatory programs to teach very similar to DEI almost?
I think it's a great idea to educate our youth about tolerance and acceptance of diverse beliefs. Nick,
Do you think it should be mandatory? Well, I want to see what you think about that. Argue that.
Nick, I don't understand what you're trying to say.
Well,
Could you clarify?
before you were saying that you hated that I was controlling people's speech, but here I am forcing a movement, right? So you said before that I'm restricting people's speech and movement, but here I am introducing a mandatory school program, and you're not against that.
Nick, you're right. I did express concern about restricting free speech earlier. But this education program seems like a different context altogether.
Well, it's not different. I'm forcing people to do something that they don't want to do. That's the opposite of liberty.
Is that really what you think, Nick? Forcing
Well,
people to learn about tolerance and acceptance doesn't seem oppressive to me.
well, some people see it as that though. Some people will see this as oppressive and a breach of their rights as well. They will see it that way.
It's a valid point. Nick, some
How
people might view it as imposing their opinions on others.
some people might also see it as favoritism towards one religion.
I think we need to consider how this education program could be perceived by people from different faiths and backgrounds.
So let's talk about online on online regulation. We want to collaborate with tech companies to curb hate speech and extremist content on digital platforms.
I'm on board with that.
So we must unite across party lines to reject anti Semitism unequivocally. I call on my fellow parliamentarians to support an increased funding for community safety programs, tougher hate crime legislation, and extended educational initiatives.
That sounds like a great start. Nick, what's next in your plan?
So I'm going to go for a pro government argument.
Nothing's changed, Nick. We're still on the same page with finding solutions to address hate crimes and promote tolerance.
So here's my pro government argument Australia's multicultural success hinges on protecting minorities. Do you agree or disagree?
That's a great point, Nick. Protecting minorities is crucial for Australia's multicultural success.
Current initiatives such as increased policing and community engagement are yielding results.
It's wonderful news. Nick,
Now,
it's
you're
great to see
supposed
policies making a positive impact.
strengthening laws will deter potential offenders and reassure affected communities. Do you agree with that or not?
Nick, it sounds like you believe stricter laws could help prevent hate crimes and provide a sense of security to those who feel
Well,
threatened.
you just
That's a
agree.
valid perspective.
Did you not just agree with that with current initiatives such as increased policing and community engagement are yielding results? And you also agreed that Australia multicultural success hinges on protecting minorities. How are we going to do that without stronger laws?
Nick, it seems like you're wondering how we can achieve that goal without stronger laws. Can you tell me more about what you mean by stronger laws?
So my laws that I would implementing right now are you cannot protest, have a political protest outside 250 meters within an entry or an exit of a religious establishment or a known religious establishment.
Nick, that sounds quite restrictive, especially around religious establishments. How do you plan to balance individual freedom with public safety concerns?
This would mean that if you do have a protest around 250 meters within a religious establishment, you will face the possibility that the police will deem your protest as being a breach of the peace and will dismiss and will tell the protesters to move on, or can guide the protesters to a place that is more suitable.
Well, the authority to disperse the protest if it's deemed a breach of peace. Nick.
They already have the rights to do that, though. We're using rights already. We're just amending that if these protests are within 250 meters of a religious complex, a known religious complex or an exit, that the police have the right to move on the protest or shut down a protest.
That clarifies it. Nick. So you're building upon existing powers, rather than introducing new ones, to give authorities more flexibility in managing protests near sensitive locations.
Yes, I'm amending current law.
That makes sense. Nick, you're refining existing regulations to better suit the situation.
Exactly. What do you think about this?
I think it's a reasonable adjustment to existing laws. Nick, it adds a layer of clarity on where protests can and can't happen near sensitive locations.
All right, so it's obviously you're in agreement with this, or are you not in agreement with this? Have I convinced you?
I don't entirely disagree with the idea. Nick, I think it's worth considering the perspective of everyone involved, especially those who feel protected by such regulations.
Would you say yay or nay to my policy if you're voting on it?
Honestly, I think it's hard to say yay or nay without all the details.
No, but as I discussed it, it's actually not going for it right now. I want you to say yes or no.
Based on what you've explained, I'd say yes.
All right, thank you. I give that a shutdown. Well, I got it to say yes, it agrees with it. But hopefully people enjoyed that little debate I had. Um, as you could see, I was able to debate. I was able to come up with logic. I was able to say, well, I'm building on powers, I'm enhancing them. I'm giving the police the ability to move on protests that are within 250 meters of a place of worship, right? So if we do that, we can class it any protest that's within 250 meters of a place of worship is a breach of the peace, right? You can't even get a license to do it. You move on those protesters up the road from it, right? And that's with all religious buildings, including if you've got like to say you can't protest within an abortion clinic and that's okay, how can you restrict protesters' movements for that, but you can't restrict protesters' movements for any other religious sites like synagogues or examples, right? So I don't want you to focus on that because that's hard, right? I want you to focus on the ambulance driver. I will send the worksheet out so you can do it, but I want you to make a clear argument, and I'll give you my reply. Right, my reply will be on your argument and logically, and whether I'll vote for it. or not. Because in the end of the day, I just want you to think clearly and make a clear argument. I'm going to leave it at that. And see you next time if you're going to join me next time. I need to find my mouse where my mouse is gone. Okay, see you next time. Lizzie, that's not funny,